Continuing on with the series of Can You Handle Going Deeper? We're going to get into the Word, and we're going to see how Jesus brought 3 disciples into a deeper relationship with Him. We're going to begin our reading at Matthew chapter 17, verses 1 through 8. Let's read. After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. There he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. Just then there appeared before them Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, a bright cloud enveloped them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell face down to the ground, terrified. But Jesus came and touched them. "Get up," he said. "Don't be afraid." When they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus. In all of the years of ministry, I have never preached on this text, not even once. I've always looked at this text and said, this is just really weird. If I could title this message, I'd call it like Weird Science. It's just interesting when you look at this. But I want to challenge you this morning to allow yourself in your relationship with God, to allow Him to take you to places and see weird things. To see special things for you, the way He did with these disciples. It will require you to go deeper with Him. I remember one time in my young spiritual walk, after I accepted Christ, and me and my friends went to a place, went to a location where we kind of mixed it up a little bit with somebody that had a different belief system than we did. I mean, we dialogued, we talked, we conversed, and we just, in a loving way, all of us, just kind of mixed it up a little bit. And I remember walking away from that experience. And by that time, it was late at night. And because they were friends, and you ever see, you have this belief system that you're raised with and that you're brought up in, and then all of a sudden you meet a different belief system that is like totally different, and you're just bantering back and forth and wondering what you believe and what they believe. And I remember driving my friends home, and I remember driving home late at night. And I remember parking myself underneath a streetlight. And I turned off my car, and I said to the Lord, I said, "God, just because I happen to be born and raised in this household, how does that somehow make me right? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe somehow I just simply believe this because it was my parents, because I was raised this way. Maybe I'm wrong." And I was it shook the foundation of my relationship with Jesus. It shook it. And I said, "Lord, I'm willing to go wherever you want me to go, and I'm willing to do whatever you want me to do." I was wide open. And I said, "Lord, I know this is not the right thing to do, but I'm just going to open up your word, and you lead me where." And I remember sitting in that car, probably 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, underneath the street light, just down the street from where I was raised. And I opened up the Bible, and this is what He gave me. Psalm 27:14. "Stay with God. Take heart. Don't quit. I say it again. Stay with God." And I remember reading that going, whoa, Wow. And I was so excited that God met me in that car. Now, you might be sitting there this morning looking at me going, that guy's a little weird. That's kind of a little strange. But you know what? For me, that was real. That was personal. That was unique for me. That God gave me that. And that's what I'm talking about this morning. That God meets you exactly where you're at, which leads me to the first point, is going deeper is personal. Going deeper is personal. You look at the disciples, it said that he took Peter, James, and John and took them to a high mountain. This was in Galilee, northern Galilee. Now, can you imagine this? He has 12 disciples that are following him, and he picks 3 and takes them up to a high mountain where they experience this amazing event that Jesus reveals and shows himself to them. Now, a couple things go through my mind when I see this. I don't know, maybe you have. But I'm thinking to myself, what do the other 9 think? What about those guys? Are they saying to themselves, wow, well, why is Jesus doing that for them and not for us? What about the other 9? What about those guys? What's going through their mind when Jesus is taking them off to this experience? I don't know, maybe they're sitting there going, well, that's great for them because, usually when Jesus takes you someplace, it's going to be work. It's going to be an event. And they're going, whew, maybe they're doing that. Now, what about the 3? As they're walking along, they're thinking, where's the other 9? What about those guys? Why aren't they with us? Why is Jesus picking on me? Or maybe they're saying to themselves, we're better than they are. We're the 3. I don't know. Maybe they're thinking, what's in store? What I'm saying about this is this. Don't look at other people's God journey. Don't look at other people's God journey. Paul says, do not compare yourselves amongst yourselves because that's unwise. It doesn't matter if you're the 9, if you're the 3. God knows exactly what each disciple needs at the time they need it and when they need it. And so don't be looking at other people's God journey and wonder about them or wonder, what about me? Because God will meet you exactly where you need it at that time you need it. It doesn't matter if it's the 9. We don't know about what else he did that day dealing with the other 9. But we do know what he's dealing with the 3. And we're going to get more specific with the 3 as we walk on to the next point. The next one is this. Number 2, going deeper in high places. Almost sounds like a country song, doesn't it? Isn't that low places? What is that? What is it? Any Garth Brooks fans here? What is it? Friends in low places. Well, I guess it's not even close. Whatever. Maybe friends in high places or something. Anyway. Going deeper in high places. You know what's interesting in Scripture is you look at the Bible all the way from Genesis all the way through to Revelation. You have mountains being talked about. You have high places being talked about. And God does amazing things in high places all through Scripture. And if you would like to fill this in as you go along, maybe some of you have already filled in some of the blanks in the outline that I have in your bulletin, and you've guessed well, but if you haven't, I'm going to kind of walk through them. The first one is this, is that the ark came to rest on Mount Ararat. Oh, you're good. Good class. Good. Mount Ararat. Here you have God bringing to rest the ark on Mount Ararat. Then you have the next one is Mount Moriah. This is where Abraham was tested by God, dealing with his only son, Isaac. And later on, by the way, you have King David buying that mountain. He bought that Mount Moriah, that high place. King David bought that, and he bought it even when the person who owned the field, he was going to, you can have it. You're the king. And David said, I will not offer to the Lord anything unless it costs me something. Isn't that great? So you have on this high place, you have later, the temple was built by his child, King Solomon. Let's move along. You have Mount Sinai, where you have Moses and the law given to Moses on this great mountain. You have Mount Nebo, where Moses was shown the promised land. You have Mount Carmel, where Elijah called fire down and ate up and consumed the sacrifice that was given. It's interesting how those two, you have Moses and you have Elijah, both on a mountaintop experience, and also with Peter, James, and John. Now you have the Mount of Olives, where Jesus gave the Olivet, as is known, the Olivet Discourse. What's beautiful, I mentioned this last week. The Mount of Olives is that same vicinity where Jesus prayed in the garden. And you can literally look from the Mount of Olives right into the temple area. And the Temple Mount, it's just gigantic. And that Temple Mount, Jesus was giving the Olivet Discourses when you could see Jesus say, and not one stone will be left upon another, as they were looking down on these massive stones that disciples recognized and saw. And you could see the impact of that message. You see, I speak within these four walls. He spoke from the Mount of Olives, that Olivet Discourse, and the pictures, it's just picturesque of what Jesus was sharing. Mount of Olives. Then you have the Mount of Transfiguration. Did I miss the Sermon on the Mount? I did, didn't I? The Sermon on the Mount, Mount of Olives. The Mount of Transfiguration, we're talking about that today. And then the last, but not the least, Mount Calvary, where Jesus was offered for us as a sacrifice in our place, because we are the ones that deserve punishment. Environment matters. Oh, the next thing is, there's one more last mountain. There's Mount Rushmore. And I added the fifth person up there. Anyway, as we quickly move on. People have been wondering, what's the next president going to be up there? But anyway, what I'm saying with this point is that the environment matters. Environment matters. You think that, yes, whether two or three are gathered together in His name, God will be there among us. But, God shows us that He takes us to different places that mean certain things. And in this place, a mountaintop, a mountain, a high place. Environment matters. Allow God, may I spiritualize this morning, allow God to take you to a high place, to a higher place in your spiritual life that will take you deeper with Him as well. Allow Him to do that. Allow Him even to do something spectacular, beyond nature, beyond the natural, supernatural, that God will personally speak to you the way He did these disciples. He will do that at just the right time, at just the right place, at just the right reason in your life. The next one is that God, or going deeper for later. You know, this is great. Don't you love the disciples' response? Let me build you. I mean, they see Moses, Elijah, and come on, isn't this great? I mean, we think that when we see some movie star, or we see some person in real life versus the television, it's like, oh, this is cool. I want their autograph. I want to say hi to them. I mean, they get the superstars of the Old Testament are right there, and they're just flipping out. It's like, this is great. This is a great moment. Let's build something for Jesus. Let's build something for Moses. Let's build a place for Elijah, and let's just camp. This is a great moment. Let's just stay here. Isn't that great? It's like, that's a perfect response that we do. But what's interesting is, what Jesus did here is not for that moment. It's for something later. You see, Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus is the one that is going to come and is going to redeem. Is going to bless all nations, bless all people, everywhere on the whole entire planet, not just Israel. Jesus is the Messiah. And what happens? What's going to happen? They're in Galilee. They're going to be heading, just in a few weeks, they're going to be heading south, and they're going to be heading to Jerusalem, and Jesus is heading to the cross. And he's told them for 3.5 years that I'm going to suffer, that I'm going to die. And what are they hearing? They're hearing, Jesus is going to come, and he's going to redeem us. He's going to defeat Rome. He's going to establish his kingdom now, and yay! And they're not getting it. He's setting them up for something that they're going to need later on. Because the Messiah is not supposed to suffer and die. A defeated Messiah? What's up with that? No Israelite would accept that. They don't even see that coming. None of them did. A Messiah is not supposed to suffer and die a humiliating death on the cross. No way. He's supposed to rise up and take control. It's not what's going to happen. Jesus told them that he's going to rise again. And you know, to the Jewish mind, to the Hebrew mind, to the Israelite mind, yes, they did believe in the resurrection. But not until the end of the days. Not until the end of all time. That's when the resurrection happened. So when Jesus is talking about the resurrection, he's going to rise again, the disciples are saying, okay, no duh. We know that's going to happen. They didn't realize it's going to be 3 days after he died. So you see, Jesus just doesn't fit the bill. And so what does God do? He takes them, what Jesus does is he takes them to a high place. He transfigures himself. You have Elijah and Moses appearing, enveloped in this light. And God speaks to them and said, "This is my son. I am pleased. Would you please listen to him?" Because what he has to say in a couple weeks from now, when you are in Jerusalem, and my son is going to be crucified on the cross. He's going to die. He's going to be placed in the tomb. And he's going to rise on the third day. You guys are going to need what I'm giving you right now. Isn't that cool? So you might be sitting there this morning. You might be going, you know what? I'm not sure if I really get this message this morning. I'm not really sure if what you're saying right now is really applicable to me right at this moment. You might walk out those doors maybe on other Sunday mornings or on this one or on another one or in other experience that you have in your life, whether it's in your car or whether it's in your prayer time or whether you're reading the Bible. You might be sitting there going, this doesn't apply to me right this moment. Sometimes we get to be spiritually spoiled. When God is saying, I might not have this for you right at this moment where you're going to build your tents and where you're going to build your little homestead for all of the wonderful things that you want right there. Just like youth camp, you know, it's like, oh, youth camp is awesome, great time, worship, fantastic, altar calls, prayer, movement, God, we feel real, and then we got to go home to mom and dad. We got to go home to parents. We got to go home to real life and jobs and work and all that other stuff. And God's saying, listen, what you got at youth camp, what you guys got at youth camp, it's not for just youth camp. It's for your whole entire life. that you'll be able to point to. They're going to be able to point to that mountaintop experience and say, God visited me up there. So when I'm in the valley, I know he's in here. That's the beauty of those mountaintop experiences. God is going deeper in understanding. Going deeper in understanding. And I want to make this quick, but this is where, if you like science, you're going to love this point. If you care less about science, maybe it'll be for a later time. But this is like the weird science type thing. You look at this Mount of Transfiguration. You look at Jesus. This is just weird. It's not natural. You don't see this every day. But Jesus said in Revelation, he said, I'm going to make all things new. There's something different going on that mountain that he's showing his disciples. That this natural world that you live in it's not all there is. Johann Kepler, this amazing mathematician and loved looking at the cosmos, he says about the natural world, the beauty of it, when you observe it, it's thinking God's thoughts after him. Because he thinks and things happen. And when you see the hand of God, you are thinking God's thoughts after him. That's beautiful. But this nature's not all where it's at. There's more than that. Was Jesus, I don't know the answer to this, but I know that Jesus was transformed. And it was not natural. You know that Elijah was there and Moses was there. And it's appointed a person once to die. Then judgment. And then what's going on with that? Who are these two characters? Is this the glorified state, that supernatural, beyond nature, beyond the physics that we experience right now, that's basically cause and effect? You look at what's going on, and I think to myself, God gives us glimpses of another physics that's going to happen. Look at this picture that I have. Revelation 1, part of 1 in verse 5. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, and the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. He who is seated on the throne, of course Jesus, said, I'm making everything new. That word new means it's never been worn before. It's of another kind. It's brand new. God's going to take all of the physics that we see today, and it's going to be all made new. I think that is cool. Even science today believes, and they look at the physical world that's around us today, especially with the discovery of the Higgs boson particle, that they see that our entire universe is on a razor's edge, held and sustained there, and they don't even know how or why. And I go, I know. And anyway. And they say that any moment there could be a phased transition where all of the physics that we have today is completely changed. The fact that even science today believes and says this, that the physics that we have now were made within less than a second of the beginning of the universe. Hang on to that one. That means if it was created, if it was made, if it came into being, the physics that we have, that means it's finite. It had a beginning, and it's going to have an end. That amazing phase transition that God is going to bring about, and the fabric of physics of this cosmos is transformed. And you say, why do you say all that? Let me give some more examples. Look at angelic beings. Go to the next slide. Look at angelic beings. That shows a supernatural element, a physics of another kind. You look at miracles, supernatural or hypernatural. You look at the Mount of Transfiguration and you look at the resurrection. God has given us a glimpse that this life is not the end, that there is a hope. You see, this is the amazing part of life, and then we're going to get to our worship time, is the beginning of life. The brand new baby. And then I know that my son, Justin, and his fiancée, her dad is dying of cancer right now at OHSU. There's the life, and then there's the end. But you know what? It's not the end. This physics that you experience today, there's a new hope. We don't mourn like those who have no hope. There's something beyond this. And Jesus showed us a glimpse of it. Kyle's going to come and the worship team's going to come. We're going to sing a song in closing, and I'm going to remain up here. If Diane wants to come up here and help us pray, and Dwayne wants to come up and help us pray, and Pastor Fowler, if you want to come up and help us pray for people. We're going to leave it open for people to come and pray. It's not going to last long. It's the time of the song. But I want you to listen to the part of this song. It says this: I've tasted and seen of the sweetness of love, where my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. In your presence, Lord. Allow his presence to fill this place this morning. Let's stand. Worship freely. Good, you got it.
There's nothing worth more that will ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, Lord. I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, when my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, Lord. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. There's nothing worth more that will ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, Lord. I've tasted and seen the sweetest of loves, when my nothing